Caroline Leavitt stood in the spotlight and something incredible was about to explode. The room was packed, buzzing with energy after her press conference, when a liberal TV host unleashed a challenge so bold, so vicious, it stopped everything cold. His voice cut through the crowd like a whip, sharp and loud, aimed straight at her. He wasn't asking nicely. He was demanding, his eyes locked on Caroline, daring her to break. What he zeroed in on wasn't her words or her politics. It was the simple, gleaming necklace hanging around her neck, a tiny silver cross that caught the light. To him, it wasn't just jewelry. It was a weapon, a target, a chance to tear her down in front of everyone. He wanted to humiliate her, to rip away her beliefs piece by piece, but what happened next was so stunning, so powerful, it flipped the whole world upside down. Caroline didn't crumble. She didn't run. She turned it into something unforgettable, and the shockwaves are still hitting today. The crowd had just heard Caroline speak. Her press conference was fresh, her words still ringing in their ears. She talked about big things: unity, freedom, the right to be yourself in a world that split wide open. She was young, bold, fierce, a leader who didn't back down, a voice for people who often feel ignored. That day she was electric, her ideas clear and strong, her presence filling the room. Some cheered, some nodded, some just listened, hooked on every word. But not everyone liked it. The liberal TV host, a guy known for his biting rants and left-leaning venom, had been waiting for this. He'd clashed with Caroline before, tense debates, sharp exchanges, but this time he wasn't after her policies. He went for something deeper, something personal, her faith, that little cross necklace. He saw it as a weak spot, a way to make her squirm. He didn't know he was about to light a fuse that would burn everything down. His words came again, louder, meaner, like a dare she couldn't ignore. The room froze, the air thick with unease. Even his own fans shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, unsure what was coming next. The tension was heavy, like a storm about to break, and all eyes landed on Caroline. That necklace wasn't fancy, just a plain silver cross, small enough to miss if you weren't looking. But to her it was everything: her faith, her belief in God, the strength she carried every day. To the host it was a symbol to mock, a chance to shame her and watch her crack. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Would she snap? Would she back off? No one knew, but Caroline, she didn't move. She stood there, steady as a rock, her face calm, her eyes clear. Something massive was brewing inside her, something that would turn this attack into a moment no one could forget. She tilted her head just a little, a faint smile touching her lips, not scared, not mad, just peaceful. That smile was a spark, a hint of the fire she held deep. The host thought he had her cornered, thought he'd make her shrink. But Caroline wasn't playing his game. She took a slow breath, her eyes locked on his, and started to speak. Her voice was soft but strong, cutting through the silence like a bell ringing out. She didn't yell, she didn't curse. She turned his ugly challenge into something beautiful, something so real it hit the room like a wave. What she said next wasn't just words. It was a thunderbolt, a quiet explosion that left everyone stunned. But before we get to that, to the moment that silenced the crowd and shook the world, let's step back. Who is Caroline Leavitt? How did she get here? This wasn't luck. This was years of grit and grace crashing into one explosive night. Caroline wasn't born with a silver spoon or a famous name. She came from a regular family, modest, hardworking people who didn't have much but had everything that mattered. Her hometown was small, tucked away in New Hampshire, a place where life was simple and faith was real. Her parents weren't loud about their beliefs. They lived them. Every day they showed her what it meant to trust God, to pray through tough times, to stand tall when the world pushed back. Faith isn't about being the loudest, her mom used to say, her voice gentle but firm. It's about being steady even when no one's with you. Caroline soaked that in, took it to heart, made it her own. She wasn't the kid who shouted in class or demanded attention. She was the one who listened, thought, and then spoke when it counted. That quiet strength stuck with her, shaped her, built her into something unbreakable. Growing up, Caroline faced her share of fights. In high school, she joined debates, stood up in front of classmates who didn't always get her, didn't always agree. She'd argue her points, her voice clear and calm, even when the room turned against her. She wasn't afraid to be the odd one out. She learned early that standing for what you believe can make you a target, but it can also make you strong. College was the same. St. Anselm, a small Catholic school where she studied politics and sharpened her mind. She was often the lone voice in lectures, defending ideas others laughed at or ignored. Professors noticed, classmates whispered, but Caroline didn't care. She kept going, kept building, kept leaning on that faith her parents gave her. By her early 20s, she was in the political game, working for Trump's team, running for Congress at 25, losing but bouncing back. She was young, sure, but wise beyond her years, a fighter who didn't quit. That day, the press conference was her stage. She talked about freedom, real freedom, the kind that lets you speak your mind, where your beliefs live without fear. She'd pushed for unity, not fake smiles, but real respect, even when people don't see eye to eye. It was bold stuff, the kind that gets under people's skin. The host hated it. He'd tangled with her before, but this time he went low. That necklace. He saw it as her soft spot, a way to break her down. He thought he'd win, thought he'd make her look small. But Caroline's faith wasn't a prop, it was her core, her rock. She stood there calm and sure, her cross shining under the lights, and what happened next was so big, so wild, it's still shaking the world today. The host wanted a fight. He got a lesson, one he'd never forget, one that would echo far beyond that room. Caroline Leavitt didn't blink when the liberal TV host barked at her to take off her necklace. It was like he'd thrown a punch and missed by a mile. The room was frozen, the crowd holding its breath, waiting for her to buckle under his nasty, loud demand. But buckling wasn't in Caroline's blood. She was built from tougher stuff, years of grit, faith, and a quiet power that didn't need to yell to be felt. The host thought he'd cornered her, thought his sharp words would make her shrink into nothing. He was dead wrong. What happened next wasn't just a comeback. It was a wildfire, spreading fast, burning bright, leaving everyone in awe. Caroline didn't just hold her ground. She turned the whole moment into something bigger, something no one could look away from, something that would light up the world. That necklace, the little silver cross, meant the world to her. It wasn't about showing off or starting trouble. It was her anchor, her reminder of God, of the strength she'd found when life got dark. The host didn't get that. He didn't want to. To him, it was a symbol to attack, a way to poke at her beliefs and watch her fall apart. His voice rang out again, louder, meaner, like he could bully her into dropping who she was. The crowd shifted, some uneasy, some curious, all waiting. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, catching every second of this raw, electric standoff. But Caroline, she was calm, too calm, almost serene. And that's when the magic started. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. She stood there, steady as ever, and let her strength shine through in a way that turned the host's plan to dust. Her voice came out soft but solid, filling the room like a warm light. She didn't need to shout. Her words had power all on their own. She held the necklace gently, her fingers brushing the cross, and kept going, her tone thoughtful, measured, unbreakable. The host froze, his sneer fading just a bit, his eyes flickering with something, doubt maybe, or surprise. He'd come to tear her down, but Caroline was building something instead. A moment so deep, so real, it hit everyone like a freight train. She wasn't fighting with anger or fear. She was standing tall, turning his attack into a lesson, a quiet storm that swept the room and beyond. The air shifted, everyone felt it, a change so big it was like the ground moved under their feet. This wasn't about a necklace anymore. This was about faith, freedom, and a strength that wouldn't bend. Let's rewind a little. Caroline didn't get this power overnight. She grew up in a home where faith wasn't just talk, it was life. Her parents were regular folks. Her dad worked construction. Her mom ran the house. Living in Atkinson, New Hampshire, a small town where people knew each other and leaned on what mattered. They didn't have fancy cars or big bank accounts, but they had belief, the kind that held them together when bills piled up or winters got rough. Sunday church wasn't a chore, it was a cornerstone. They prayed together, read the Bible, talked about God like he was part of the family. Caroline watched her mom kneel by the bed every night, her dad bow his head before meals. God's with us, they'd say, and she believed it, felt it in her bones. That faith wasn't loud or pushy. It was steady, deep, a root that kept them standing no matter what. Caroline carried that root with her everywhere. In school, she was the kid who didn't follow the crowd. She'd sit in history class, listening to teachers talk about politics, culture, the way the world was going, and she'd really think about what she believed. When debates came up, she'd step in, her voice clear, her ideas sharp, even if she was the only one saying it. Classmates rolled their eyes sometimes, called her old-fashioned, but she didn't care. She'd argue about freedom, about values, about faith, and she'd win not with volume but with reason. High school turned into college, St. Anselm, where she majored in politics and kept that same fire. She'd sit in lecture halls, surrounded by students who leaned left, and she'd speak up, alone, often defending what she stood for. Professors respected her even when they disagreed. She wasn't there to fit in. She was there to stand out. Her early career was no different. At 22, she joined Trump's press team, young, green, but fearless. She handled reporters, dodged tough questions, learned fast how to fight in a world that didn't play nice. In 2022, she ran for Congress, 25 years old, taking on New Hampshire's 1st District, a long shot against a big-name Democrat. She lost, but she didn't break. She came back stronger, louder, building a name as a voice for the quiet ones, the people who felt stepped on, ignored, shut down. That press conference. It was her moment, talking unity, freedom, faith in a country tearing itself apart. The host hated it, hated her guts, her cross, her calm. He thought he'd crush her with one nasty demand. But Caroline's faith wasn't a decoration, it was her backbone. She looked at him, steady and sure, and turned his attack into something beautiful. What she did next was pure fire. She didn't scream or cry, she just kept going, her voice a steady stream of truth that washed over the room. This wasn't about winning a shouting match. It was about showing the world what faith looks like, not loud or pushy, but strong, unshakable, real. The host wanted to break her spirit. Instead, she broke through the hate, the tension, the noise, and lit up the space with something no one could touch. Something massive was unfolding, something that would spread far beyond that moment, and it was only getting bigger. Caroline Leavitt wasn't just standing there, she was rising, and the world was about to feel the heat. Caroline Leavitt stood tall, her voice steady, her little cross necklace shining like a beacon under the harsh studio lights. The liberal TV host had tried to crush her, his demand to take it off, ringing out like a gunshot meant to shatter her resolve. He thought he'd make her small, turn her faith into a punchline for the crowd to laugh at. But Caroline didn't bend, not an inch. She didn't snap or run. She turned his ugly attack into something so stunning, so pure, it left the room speechless and the world gasping. This wasn't just a clash anymore. It was a turning point, a moment so huge it would echo far beyond that packed space. The host wanted a victim to mock. He got a warrior who rewrote the story, and what happened next would become the stuff of legend, raw, real, and impossible to ignore. Her words flowed like a river, soft but unstoppable. She touched the necklace lightly, her fingers brushing the silver cross, and spoke with a calm that felt like strength itself. She didn't rush, didn't falter. Every word landed like a stone, building something solid in the silence. The crowd was quiet, hanging on every syllable, their eyes wide, their breaths held. The host's smirk faded, his confidence cracking just a little, his stance shifting as her voice sank in. He walked in ready to tear her apart, but Caroline wasn't falling, she was rising, lifting the whole room with her. She didn't need to fight back with fists or fury. Her quiet power did all the work, turning his venom into dust and his trap into a stage for something greater. The energy shifted, palpable, electric, alive, and the moment grew bigger than anyone expected. She kept going, her voice a steady thread weaving through the tension. She talked about the necklace, not as jewelry, but as a symbol of her journey, her battles, the dark nights when faith was all she had. The room stayed silent, cameras flashing, pens scratching, but no one dared break the spell. Caroline wasn't just talking to the host now. She was reaching everyone, speaking to anyone who'd ever felt attacked, silenced, or pushed down. Her words weren't loud, but they hit hard, deep, true, cutting through the noise like a blade. The host shifted again, his hands twitching like he wanted to interrupt but couldn't find the words. He started this to shame her, but she was turning it around, showing him up, not with anger but with a grace that left him stumbling. The crowd felt it, the air thick with something new, something unstoppable. Let's step back again. Caroline's strength didn't come out of thin air. She was forged in a life that tested her early and often. Growing up in Atkinson, New Hampshire, she wasn't handed anything fancy. Her family lived in a modest house, 2 stories, white siding, a yard with a swing set her dad built himself. Money was tight sometimes, construction slowed in winter, bills stacked up, but her parents never let it show. They worked hard, prayed harder, kept the lights on and the table full. Faith was their glue, Sunday mornings at church, Wednesday Bible studies, nightly prayers by the bedside. Caroline learned young that God wasn't just a story, he was real, a presence she could lean on when things got tough. Her mom would sit with her after school, reading verses, talking about courage, about standing firm. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone but him," she'd say, and Caroline carried that like a shield. School was where she first faced the world head-on. In middle school, she'd sit in social studies, listening to kids debate hot topics, politics, religion, the way things were going. She'd wait, then speak, calm, clear, different. Her classmates didn't always get it. Some teased her, called her church girl, but she didn't flinch. High school was bigger, harder. She joined the debate team, stood up in front of packed rooms, argued her points even when the crowd booed. She wasn't loud or flashy, but she was sharp. Teachers noticed, gave her nods even when they disagreed. College at St. Anselm was the same. She walked into lecture halls full of left-leaning kids, professors with agendas, and she'd hold her own. She'd write papers on freedom, on faith, on why people should listen to each other, and she'd stand by them even when she was the only one. That's Caroline, young, tough, a rock in a storm. The press conference had set this all up. She walked in that day, March 25, 2025, ready to talk about what mattered: unity in a divided nation, freedom to speak and believe, the right to be yourself without shame. Her words weren't fluffy, they were real, raw, the kind of stuff that sticks with you. The crowd loved it, some cheered loud, some clapped quiet, all felt her fire. But the host, he despised it. He'd clashed with her before, TV spots, radio hits, but this time he went for her soul. That necklace was his excuse, his way to make her look weak. He thought he'd win with one cruel swing. But Caroline turned it around, fast, fierce, flawless. Her voice stayed steady, her cross stayed put, and the host's plan fell apart. Then came the knockout. She spoke about unity, not fake, forced sameness, but real respect for differences. Her words rose just a touch, her eyes bright, her presence filling every corner. The crowd couldn't hold back, they erupted, clapping, cheering, a roar that shook the walls. The host opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He nodded, shaky, like he knew he'd lost. Caroline didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She won not with hate, but with truth. That moment wasn't just hers. It was a spark, a fire that would spread, a story that would grow. Something massive was starting, something that would ripple out and change everything. Caroline Leavitt had faced the storm and come out stronger, and the world was about to see just how far that strength could go. Caroline Leavitt's stand against the liberal TV host didn't just end when the crowd cheered. It lit a match that set the world ablaze. The room was still ringing with applause as she stood there, her cross necklace gleaming, her face calm but fierce. The host had tried to break her with his loud, nasty demand, but he'd failed, miserably. Instead, Caroline turned his attack into a moment of pure power, a quiet victory that left everyone stunned. The air felt alive, buzzing with what just happened, and the crowd couldn't hold it in. They clapped, shouted, some even stood, their hands hitting hard in a wave of noise. The host, shaken, gave a small nod like he knew he'd been beat. But that was just the start. What came next was bigger, wilder, and louder than anyone could have guessed. Caroline's moment wasn't staying in that room. It was about to take over everything. The applause wasn't polite, it was raw, chaotic, real. People leaped to their feet, some with tears in their eyes, others pumping fists like they'd just seen a champ win a title fight. Even those who didn't buy her faith felt it. Something big, something true had happened. Caroline stood steady, her necklace shining, her expression unchanged. She didn't smirk or cheer. She didn't need to. The host, though, he was rattled. His plan to shame her had backfired hard. He'd swung and missed, and now he was the one looking small. The cameras caught it all, his stumble, her strength, the crowd's roar, and that footage was about to break free and run wild. Caroline didn't stop to bask in it. She walked off, her team guiding her through the chaos, leaving the room buzzing. But the whispers started fast and they wouldn't stop. Backstage, the storm was already brewing. Reporters scrambled, shouting questions at anyone who'd listen. What just happened? Was that planned? Is the host okay? Caroline's crew stayed cool, keeping her out of the fray. She'd said enough, done enough. But the rumors flew like sparks. Some said the host stormed off, fuming, his face red with anger, cursing her name under his breath. Others claimed he slumped in his chair, head in his hands, replaying how it all went wrong. No one knew the real story. His team locked it down tight. But the tale spread anyway, growing bigger, juicier, wilder with every telling. One thing was clear. He'd picked the wrong fight and Caroline had turned it into something epic. That moment wasn't fading, it was growing, and the world was about to catch fire. The clip hit the internet like a rocket blast. Within hours, shaky phone videos were everywhere: X, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, flooding every corner of the digital world. Liberal host owned by young leader screamed one title. Faith triumphs. Caroline Leavitt shuts down attack blared another. Millions watched, her calm voice cutting through, the host's sneer crumbling, the crowd's eruption shaking the speakers. People couldn't stop sharing it, retweets, likes, shares piling up by the thousands. The numbers climbed fast, 10 million views by morning, 20 million by nightfall, a runaway train no one could stop. Hashtags exploded. #Caroline strong, faith fight, #host fail, trending worldwide, topping charts from New York to Tokyo. This wasn't just a viral hit. It was a movement, a tidal wave crashing over everything in its path. The reaction split the world wide open. Caroline's fans, people who loved her guts, her faith, called it a miracle, a gift from above. She showed what belief can do, one ex-post said, racking up tens of thousands of likes. Churches shared the clip, pastors preached about her, hailing her as proof that God lifts up the brave. Her supporters saw her as a hero, young, fearless, a voice for the forgotten. But the host's side fought back hard. His fans, left-leaning, loud, angry, cried foul, yelling it was a setup, a cheap trick. She played the victim card, they shouted, digging up old clips of her speeches, trying to paint her as fake, a poser. It didn't stick. The video was too real, too raw, but they kept swinging. Even some who hated her politics had to admit it. She'd won that round fair and square. The internet turned into a war zone, love versus hate, faith versus fury, and no one was backing off. Newsrooms jumped on it like sharks on blood. CNN ran it with a spin. Young conservative stands up to TV host in viral clash. Fox News cheered louder. Caroline Leavitt defends faith against liberal bully. MSNBC grumbled, calling it staged drama for the right-wing crowd. Headlines popped up fast, clickbait gold like host's big mistake, underestimating her, and faith clash shocks nation. Papers overseas grabbed it too, London, Sydney, Paris, all buzzing about the American girl who wouldn't break. The story wasn't just big, it was global, crossing borders, lighting up screens everywhere. And the question on everyone's lips, what happens next? The host stayed quiet, licking his wounds. Caroline stayed quiet too, letting the moment breathe. But that silence didn't last, it couldn't. Something wilder was coming, something that would shake the world even more, and it was already on the horizon. Caroline Leavitt's showdown with the liberal TV host didn't just make waves, it tore the world in two. The clip of her facing down his "take it off" sneer spread like wildfire, millions watching, sharing, screaming their takes. That little silver cross necklace, simple, quiet, bold, became a lightning rod splitting people down the middle. Was she a hero standing tall? A fake playing a game? Did she crush him, or did he trip over his own arrogance? Everyone had an opinion and no one kept it to themselves. What started in that crowded room turned into a global war. Online, on TV, in homes, on streets. And it was only getting louder, hotter, crazier. Caroline's moment wasn't fading, it was growing, and the fallout was shaking everything to its core. The internet went berserk. X was a battlefield. Half the posts crowned Caroline a legend, a queen who stood up and won. "She's the voice we need," one user wrote, racking up thousands of retweets. "Faith and guts love her," another fired back. "She's just pandering to the Bible thumpers fake." The clip got remixed. slow-motion shots of her smile, epic music over the crowd's roar, edits that made it look like a movie scene. Memes flooded in. One showed the host with a clown nose, caption "Picked the wrong fight." Another zoomed in on Caroline's necklace, labeled tiny but unbeatable. Views hit 50 million in days, likes and shares stacking up so fast the counters couldn't keep up. This wasn't a trend, it was a takeover, a digital storm that swallowed everything else whole. TV couldn't stay away, it was all over the airwaves. Fox News ran it nonstop, calling her America's new warrior princess. Pundits gushed. She stood for freedom, for faith against a bully. CNN kept it cooler. A tense moment, real or rehearsed, MSNBC sneered. She's milking the martyr act, classic move. Panels argued, some said she was brave, others said she was sly. Ratings spiked, people tuned in just to shout at their TVs. Newspapers piled on too. Faith Under Fire screamed one headline. Host, blunder goes viral, blared another. Late-night comics jumped in, one cracked. He said take it off, and she took him out. The story was everywhere, screens, papers, phones, a beast no one could tame. Celebrities waded into the mess, making it louder. A big singer tweeted, "Caroline's my hero, Faith wins." A famous actor shot back, "She's just fishing for clout, lame." Politicians picked sides, conservatives hailed her as the future, liberals called her a prop for the right. The culture war hit full blast, red versus blue, belief versus doubt, young versus old. Churches held her up like a saint, activists tore her down like a villain. Families fought over it, parents praising her, kids rolling their eyes. Workplaces buzzed, coworkers arguing her words over coffee breaks. This wasn't just about Caroline anymore. It was about everyone, what they believed, who they backed, how they saw the world. That little cross, it wasn't just hers now, it was a symbol splitting nations. The host didn't vanish, he came back swinging. After days of silence, he popped up on his show, smirking but shaky. He tried to spin it. I asked a question, she gave a sermon, good for her. His fans clapped, his haters booed. He claimed he wasn't attacking, just probing, but no one bought it. The clip showed the truth. His ratings dipped, people called him weak, a bully who couldn't take the heat. X lit up with host down, jokes, insults, calls for him to say sorry. He didn't. He doubled down, tweeting, "I'd do it again, Faith doesn't get a free pass." That just threw gas on the fire. Caroline's fans raged, his supporters rallied. The clash wasn't over, it was growing, reloading, ready for round two. Caroline stayed quiet at first, letting the storm rage on its own. Her team shared the clip but kept her off the spotlight, smart move. It made her bigger, untouchable, a mystery that fueled the hype. People started digging, who was she really? Her past came up, small-town girl, big dreams, faith that never quit. Some loved it, she's real. Others mocked it, too perfect, too staged. Her press conference words, unity, freedom, got replayed, dissected, praised, and trashed. The necklace turned into a star. People posted pics of their own crosses, tagging her, copying her. She wasn't just a name anymore, she was a force, a symbol, and the world was tearing itself apart over what she meant. Something huge was still coming, bigger than the fight, wilder than the noise, and it was already rumbling closer. Caroline Leavitt's clash with the liberal TV host didn't just stop when she walked off. It sparked a fire that burned bright and long. A moment so massive it rewrote her life and shook the world to its roots. That day, March 25, 2025, became more than a showdown. It was a legend, a wildfire that spread across continents, a story that wouldn't die. The clip of her standing tall, her cross shining, the host crumbling, it didn't fade into the noise. It grew, morphed, became a piece of history people couldn't stop living, fighting over, holding on to. Was she a hero who proved faith could win? A clever player who outsmarted a bully? The truth got buried in the chaos, but one thing stuck. Caroline's quiet strength had changed everything, and the aftermath was a storm that's still raging today. The numbers were mind-blowing. That clip hit 150 million views on YouTube in 2 weeks, faster than anything ever before. X posts topped 30 million, hashtags like Caroline Strong and Faith Wins drowning out every other trend. TV networks looped it. Fox News called it a victory for the faithful. CNN said, a viral moment that won't quit. MSNBC muttered, a right-wing fairy tale. Ratings for the host show tanked, down 40% in a month, while Caroline's name lit up every screen. Ad companies scrambled to tie their brands to her. Jewelry stores sold out of silver crosses, people snapping them up to wear their own piece of the story. This wasn't a blip, it was a monster, swallowing the internet, TV, even the streets. Protests popped up, some waving crosses high, others burning them in anger. The world split hard, and Caroline was the fault line. She broke her silence 10 days later, not on TV but X, with a post that hit like a bomb. It was simple, strong. Faith isn't about fighting, it's about standing. Thank you for standing with me. Boom, 7 million likes, 2 million retweets in hours. Her fans lost it, she's unstoppable. Churches preached it, conservatives framed her as their new star. Critics scoffed, too neat, too scripted, but her words stuck, quiet and fierce like her. The host fired back on his show. She's good at this, give her a medal. His smirk was weak, his audience thin. His tweet, "Faith doesn't win debates," got drowned in host-fail replies. He tried a comeback special, ratings flopped. People didn't care about him anymore. Caroline owned the story now, and her grip was iron-tight. The fallout hit deep and wide. Caroline's name soared, speaking gigs poured in, book deals landed on her desk, TV offers stacked up. She didn't rush, she picked slow, smart, staying true to her roots. Her press conference ideas, unity, freedom, became rallying cries. Conservatives cheered. She's our future. Liberals pushed back. She's a tool. Polls shifted. Her recognition spiked, crossing lines, winning over even some doubters. She's got guts, one voter said, shrugging. The necklace. It was iconic. Jewelry ads copied it, kids wore knockoffs, pastors blessed it in sermons. But hate came too, threats hit her inbox, trolls swarmed her mentions, calls to cancel her grew loud. She brushed it off. I've faced worse. Her team upped security, but she kept moving, unshaken, unbreakable, a force rising fast. The host faded into the shadows. His show bled viewers, down 50% by summer. Sponsors ditched him, fans walked away. He tried a podcast, barely a whisper. X kept roasting him, lost to a necklace dude. He sued her defamation, $10 million, claiming she tanked his career with lies. Courts tossed it, free speech, public figure, no dice. It just kept her name alive. Caroline's response: I pray he finds peace. Classy, cutting, perfect. The legal mess dragged into 2026, but it didn't matter, she'd already won. He was a footnote. She was the headline, the star who wouldn't dim. The real impact went beyond them, it shook the world itself. Faith got loud, churches filled up, debates raged on every corner. Some saw her as a saint, God chose her. Others saw a threat, she's forcing religion. Schools felt it, kids wore crosses, teachers banned them, parents fought back. Lawsuits sprang up, faith versus rights, freedom versus rules. Politicians jumped in, bills named after her, speeches quoting her words. The culture war hit a boiling point. Red states praised her, blue states pushed back hard. Families split, grandparents loved her, teens mocked her. Workplaces banned the clip, too divisive, too hot. It wasn't about a necklace anymore, it was about belief, freedom, who gets to speak and who gets to stay. Years later, it's still alive. That day, March 25, 2025, lives on in documentaries, books, late-night reruns. Caroline's necklace sits in a museum now, scratched but shining, a relic of the moment that changed her life. The host, a trivia question forgotten by most. Caroline, she's more leader, symbol, spark. She kept going, speaking, writing, building a legacy that didn't fade. Some call her a hero who proved faith can stand tall. Others say she played the game better than anyone. The truth, lost in the noise maybe, but the moment, her calm, his fall, the crowd's roar, stays burned into memory. It wasn't just a win, it was a wake-up call, a shout that faith, grace, and guts can shake the world. And the ending, it's good, better than good. Caroline didn't just survive that night, she thrived. She built on it, grew stronger, became a voice that wouldn't quit. The host faded, his career a wreck, but Caroline rose, speaking to crowds, writing books, leading with that same quiet fire. Her necklace stayed, a symbol, yes, but more a reminder of who she was, who she'd always be. The world kept arguing, some loved her, some hated her, but she kept standing, kept shining. Who won that night? Depends on who you ask. But one thing's sure, Caroline Leavitt showed what strength really looks like, and her legacy, born in that fiery moment, lives on, bright, bold, and forever unbroken. While Caroline's stand was unreal, did she crush the host or did faith steal the show? Hit that like button if this blew you away. Subscribe now and tap the bell, don't miss what's next. Share this with your friends, let's get everyone in on this. Drop your thoughts below, was Caroline the real winner? Let's argue it out in the comments. See you in the next one.